And it's just complete BS. It really is. It's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong on so many levels. It's amazing how many rants I can fit into one rant. Hi, Brant Cooper here. I'm fortunate I get to travel around the world speaking with startup founders, investors, ecosystem developers. I've learned a lot in my travels. I've got some stories, and I have some thinking that I love to share. Welcome to Brant's Rant. When I was in high school, I took calculus. I actually took 2 years of calculus. I was no math whiz, to be honest, and really labored my way through that. Yeah, but sort of that math part of my life is a completely different story. But uh, we used to joke, our small class of people in calculus, our uh, rule of thumb was, when in doubt, take the derivative. Uh, and so this harkens back to those big S's that you would draw when you were working with definite integrals. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to use lines, a series of lines, to come up with the area underneath the curve. If I remember this correctly, somebody's going to correct me. And sort of the more lines that you can draw inside underneath this curve is going to give you the most uh, accurate area underneath the curve. And so I have sort of this modern version of take the derivative, and it sort of goes along with this idea of models. So EB Box, I think is this guy's name, who said he was a statistician, and he said all models are wrong, some are useful, and he was really applying it to statistical models. But I apply it to like all models. And human beings, this is what we one of the things that we do is create these models that overlay reality. And these models allow us to, you know, des- describe within some degree of accuracy the real world, and we can play with the models in ways that we can't play with the real world. And so we play with the models in order to learn, what different effects on the model. Maybe those different effects also uh, will reflect in the real world, and we can learn from that and maybe do some amount of prediction. And of course, in math and science, you can do a lot of prediction when you do it right, and you actually are successful experiments. You've figured something out. Now you can replicate that the results because you've learned what the cause is. And so that's a high fidelity model, right? Whatever they've come up with is accurately reflects the real world because they can use that model to predict what will happen. Uh, so it's sort of an interesting philosophy to think about models, and so everything human humans do at some level is a model. I think like law is a model. Law is a verbal model, and it's one that's like completely run amok. So we have sort of this level of citizenry that has taken our rules of society and coded them in legalese such that only that layer can really understand them. And so, if we want to do anything in society, we actually have to go to this layer and get them to accurately, interpret for us what the heck is going on, and how do we change them to our advantage, and all of the legal stuff. It's a model. It's sometimes it accurately reflects what society is trying to do, what the person who wrote the law uh, was trying to uh, codify. And and so you hear the term, the spirit of the law, and we've gotten way beyond. We don't give a crap about the spirit of the law. It's really about how various parties can interpret this layer of legalese, and then judges or juries deciding which side is correct, and precedent and all of these other type of things. Um, one of the worst victims of this layer of legalese is patents. the original purpose of patents, which is interesting to see something like patents in the U.S. Constitution, and and the original intent really was for scientific people to describe an invention, uh, and others would come and leverage the patents in order to be innovative, in order to create innovation. So to use the patents to create value in the world, and typically it wasn't the scientists, but the scientist, was the one who was able to, codify that idea, and so that they had rights to that. So that's great. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, um, but there was a patent that already existed for the light bulb, and so he actually had to work with that patent, or he came up with his own patents that competed against it, or I'm not exactly sure what the full story is there, uh, but Thomas Edison, sort of literally what he would do is comb through patent archives to try to figure out if there was something that he could bring to market that would be a successful business while also creating value in the world. Uh, yeah, so that's kind of, there's a humorous part of that when you think about the light bulb being representative of the eureka moment idea, and that doesn't describe Edison at all. But so this whole legal part is a model, and again, I think it's somebody, the this layer has interpreted or has created the model in a way that creates a whole industry. To be honest, medicine is a model, and and we people say all the time that 1,000 years from now, people are going to look back and think our existing medical practices is barbaric. I mean, it's what we have now, and the advances that have been made have been absolutely incredible, and they continue to be made. And the promises over we keep hearing what's going to happen in 30 years, with all of the genetic research and all of this other robotics and it's always 30 years away or something. I get older and it's still 30 years away. Um, but it's a model, and it's one that evolves, and it evolves scientifically for the most part. But I also think it's rather interesting that the gap between when science declares fat bad, and then the time it takes that, like, oh, no, we had that all wrong, and actually fat is good, and it's just this processed food part of it. I suspect some of that is not the science itself, but it's rather the interpretation of the science by media and by others that are trying to write about it, and sort of a dichotomy between what the actual science says and what theories are around what that science means. And the theories are just simply theories; they're not proven yet. It's somebody saying, "Hey, this is what this science might mean for us in society," and there's something that gets lost in that translation. But it's also new data, new science, new experiments come out and basically change what we believed a very short while ago, and yet we're so certain when we announce it the first time. So it's a model, and again, I think it's a pretty reasonable model for where we are today. Uh, but we just create models out of for everything, and I think economics it's filled with horrible models. And it's so funny to me because all of these PhDs and their economics degrees. I have a bachelor, which doesn't mean I'm an economist. It means it means absolutely nothing in economics. But all of these advanced degrees, and they create all of these models. And so my one of my pet jokes is around the term ceteris paribus, which basically means everything remaining equal. And so economists go like, hey, we can predict the future of economics based upon this model where we're working with just a handful of variables, and then we throw on the word ceteris paribus at the end, meaning as long as all these other variables remain how they are, remain equal, well, wow, we can do all this manipulation in this model over here, and it accurately predicts what's going on. The unfortunate part is the world doesn't exist with all those other variables, ceteris paribus. And so these models that are created are just absolutely wrong, and they become sort of laws. We tend to believe them, and yet the predictions just rarely come true. And so economists so badly want to be considered scientists, yet they can never accurately predict the future, which is the hallmark of good science, is figuring something out and then being able to run an experiment and predict what the future is. And we get it wrong all the time. It's because we can't hold those variables constant. And it doesn't matter how many times you take the derivative and put another line in under the curve, you're not accurately reflecting the reality. And so it's useless. If it does not affect reality, it's a useless model. And we need to reject models that are useless. Stephanie Kelton's book on the deficit myth is absolutely brilliant in cutting through what Kenneth Galbraith would call the conventional wisdom, and suddenly now able to describe the role that federal budget deficits play in the economy, and just cuts through the BS of how deficits by themselves are bad, and we're measuring the wrong thing. Uh, Literally the federal deficit that's in the trillions is not really debt. It's just so filled with the misuse of terms, and our old models around how we measure inflation and unemployment and deficits and GDP. They're so wrong. And it's crazy because they serve the benefit of those that are in power. And it gives this rationalization for austerity and rationalization for, not taking care of not only the poor but the middle class. Listen, I want to take care of the poor too, but to me, it's the middle class that's been screwed these last 30 years, especially, and and the fact that they back these politicians that do not have their own interests at heart, and that, frankly, that's on both the left and the right. It's just absolutely extraordinary. But it's way worse on the right. Way worse. The right has no interest in you middle class people. No interest at all. And why you would ever back a right wing person is just beyond my comprehension. They couldn't care less about you. Just could not care less. But they want to keep you alive because they want to send your sons and daughters to war. So I guess that's a plus. They want to keep you alive. But they're not going to give you health care in order to keep you alive. Just, I don't want to get too ranty on the politics side, but it's just people's inability to even, act rational in the sense of their own benefits. It's just extraordinary. But so another one of these models that is wrong, which is a little bit more closer to, I guess, what I do is this model around innovation inside of corporations specifically, and so there's this model that sort of lays out for companies how they're supposed to deal with the future of their companies. Like, where is future growth going to come from? And it's going to come from innovation. And so in order to do that, what you need to is apply this horizon planning model, and you have to have these levels of innovation going on simultaneously inside your organization. And so you have sort of this incremental improvement, continuous improvement in your existing core business, and that's Horizon 1. And then there's this Horizon 2, which is incremental innovation, and so that's maybe changing the product or a new product that's in the same market, and it'll take 2, 3, 4 years for this new product or this new quote unquote innovation to come to market and for you to get your return on investment. But again, you have to be starting today in order to achieve that. And then if you want to do breakthrough innovation, which is, all companies must do breakthrough innovation, they must do disruptive innovation. And in order to do that, you have to set up this dedicated lab, and they're responsible for breakthrough innovation. And they're going to come up with whatever's going to save the business 5, 6, 7 years down the road. And it's just complete BS. It really is. It's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong on so many levels. It's amazing how many rants I can fit into one rant. But so let's break that down a little bit. So the first thing is the horizon model was originally came from a book out of a couple of McKinsey partners called The Alchemy of Growth. And it wasn't about innovation. It was used a couple of times in the book, the word innovation, I think. And it was really about where's your growth going to come from. And so, one of the possibilities of growth is through innovation. But what you want in a portfolio is various ways that you might achieve growth. You might take an existing product and launch it into an emerging market, and it takes 5 years for that launch to return investment. Well, that's an H3, right? So that's third horizon. It has nothing to do with innovation. It certainly has nothing to do with breakthrough innovation, but certainly it's a valid way to go find growth. And so why, if you were a senior executive inside of a company and you were trying to figure out how you're going to fund your portfolio, why would you go like, should I invest in these products coming into these emerging markets, or should I invest in this team, this lab coming up with breakthrough innovation, whatever that means? So if you're inside of an innovation lab and you understand, and you want to understand why you don't get funding, well, that's why. I mean, it's not a rational choice. Now, I've done a little bit more thinking on that because I get pushback on this idea that this bimodal system, the bimodal system is that you split your company up where 95 or 99% of your company is merely executing in the core. They're doing everything to protect their existing revenues through execution, working harder, productivity, squeezing blood out of our turnips, that are our workers. Just insane. And so that's 95 or 90% of your company. And then there's this little innovation lab, 5% of the company, 1% of the company. And we're going to spin up this lab and they're going to go do breakthrough innovation. No, they're not. It's not how breakthrough innovation happens. A startup entrepreneur doesn't go like, oh, should I build an app phone or a new jet propulsion system? Innovation like that often happens by accident. It happens because the timing is right for a particular idea, and all of these transformation layers that are underneath it create the right timing. It's invention. Now, if you're a tech company or a chemical company or it's somebody in the life sciences, you should still have an R&D and you should be doing invention. It's not innovation, though. Innovation is invention brought to market at scale. But you should be doing invention if that's what your corporate DNA is. But the vast majority of the companies don't need to do anything technologically innovative. They leverage other people's technology innovation, and then maybe they're able to create some sort of a product or service on top of all of that technology transformation. So maybe they're able to create these products or services based upon all of that technology innovation or invention. They're able to create these products and services that create value and maybe even disrupt the market. If you look at it from the startup perspective, there's no technology innovation, breakthrough innovation at Airbnb or at Uber or at Facebook. They're leveraging these layers of technology and how inexpensive it is, and computing processing power and these other things, cloud, whatever. So they leverage existing technology in new ways that provide value to the edge of the economy in a way that disrupts the businesses that were serving those needs before. And so the idea that you divide up the company, using this bimodal system or dual operating system or ambidextrous organization is wrong. The whole organization needs to be reformed in order to serve the edge of the market. And we have to be agile in responding to customer needs. And so the idea of spinning up a lab to do breakthrough innovation just doesn't make any sense. You can't do use a technology invention structure of a company in order to do edge-based innovation or edge-based growth initiatives. And so I think the innovation industry hasn't changed that tune in 30 or 40 years, right? So the big consulting companies have been talking about that sort of bimodal system for 30, 40 years, maybe longer. And even the new modern layer of innovation consultants just repeat that stuff as if it were, I guess we've got a conventional wisdom issue again. And new ideas spread just like the life cycle adoption curve. That's what the cycle adoption curve was originally about. Uh, and so you've got early adopters and early majority and all those type of things. And so we're just sort of in this new wave of thinking, I think, where it's not really about dividing your company up into this execution mode and this learning mode, or exploit and explore, or I mean, it's all got so many names. It's hilarious. The search mode is the other term that I use. So I think that the way to think about this stuff is based upon the level of uncertainty you face. And it could be uncertainty, whether it's, technology uncertainty, or it could be market-based uncertainty, or it could be uncertainties inside of anywhere inside of a business model. But the idea is that you always have to balance the execution and the search, no matter where you are in the organization. Even the whole search mode kind of comes from the startup world, right? Because the startups are working in this sort of chaotic, hey, we got to learn how to create this business, we got to learn how to scale it. And so there's all this learning going on. But the point in a startup is not to always be learning. If you're always learning, then you're always a small business. The point is to learn how to execute. It's to figure out the blueprint to start executing. And so this is true, it's a continuum of uncertainty, where there's more uncertainty when you're looking at Horizon 3 type of new products, and you're more uncertain in the startup world. But the idea is to learn as quickly as possible and start executing on that learning. And so there's where the balance is. And so what we have to teach is, number one, inside the core business, everywhere inside the business, from the back office functions all the way to the C-suite, to product innovation. Everybody needs to learn how to, number one, balance the learning mode and the execution mode, balance what we, admit what we don't know and figure out what that balance is. And then we work into our daily practices, learning plus the execution based upon what we've already learned. And so again, some parts of the company, yes, you're going to have more learning, but their whole purpose is to learn to execute. It's not to stay in the learning mode. And so again, the bimodal system just makes no sense at all. And they draw a bunch of fancy diagrams that show, execution mode because we already know this stuff, and then no, learning mode because we don't know anything, and then in between, it's like in between. So then you're balancing, but is there really total certainty over on this execution side? Pandemic hits, our market's changed. Do we go to the innovation? Are we now innovating? Wait a second, my customers have changed. No, you always have uncertainty over there. It's just normally in a small amount, but the pandemic drives home the point that there's uncertainty across the organization, and so we have to learn how to balance it, the learning versus the executing. And so we have to learn how to do the learning mode, and we also have to learn how to do that balancing. And so I talk about those different parts with my 5 E's, right? So it's empathy work, understanding customers, or understanding internally, understanding stakeholders in a deep way that we can understand what's motivating them and their aspirations. Running experiments to validate or invalidate our assumptions on how to respond to that uncertainty. Evidence, so cutting through our biases by using the data and the insights that we glean in order to direct what we do next. Equilibrium, so that we're balancing how much execution we've got going on versus how many of these learning processes we use agile to do that, right? Because you can build in learning into every one of your agile sprints. And again, all across the business, this is not just an R&D effort. This is anywhere inside the business. And then finally, the ethics is the final E, and I think this is really vital, and I'm sure I'll rant about this later, but when we're learning all of this from our customers and we're running experiments, we have an ethical responsibility to treat our customers with respect and to treat their data with respect. And I think this is a struggle with some companies and a lot of the big tech companies, where they don't have guardrails around their behavior, and they're just allowed to do anything that drives the numbers. And I love the agile 2 pizza team, responsible for a metric. That is actually how we should be measuring people's performance, draw a straight line from what that team is doing and really what the results are. And so it really creates a lot of efficiencies. But we have to put guardrails around those behaviors so that they're ethical and they adhere to our values, both as a company but also as a society. So there's a lot more I can dive in on this. I started off with taking the derivative, and then I went to how that's applied in different areas and models and how they're wrong and ceteris paribus. Uh, I think we have to be careful with these models. Models are, some of them, uh, you've taken the derivative enough times that you've created a pretty accurate picture. And in these other models, it no longer reflects reality, and we need to learn how to abandon models when they no longer reflect reality. Hey, thanks for listening to Brant's Rant. If we're choosing capitalism here as a society, then let's make it work for a better world. If you'd like to join me as we redefine capitalism for the 21st century, go to beatcoop.co/D4A. Also, if you have a pressing issue that you're facing in your innovation group, your product group, your startup, and want to join me on video, see the link below. Subscribe, like, see you next time.